All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining. It's great to see over 40 folks tuning in for learning more about the Metaverse Standards Forum Accessibility Working Group. We're really excited to share what we're going on and hopefully adding additional members to our group. So um, to kick it off, we will start with some intros, and then I will dive into what you can expect for the next hour. So I'll go first, and then I'll pass to Dylan. Um, my name is Erin. I work at Meta's Reality Labs, and I focus on accessibility strategy. So thinking about Reality Labs as a whole, and really looking into what our standards are for accessibility, whether it be today or in the future, and how that should look. Of course, that's highly relevant to this topic. Really looking towards the industry to identify best practices and ensure that XR tech becomes accessible as soon as possible. So with that, I'll kick it over to Dylan to introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dylan Fox. I'm the Director of Operations for XR Access. We are a research initiative at Cornell Tech on the East Coast, focused on making XR accessible for anyone and everyone. Really excited to be here to be a part of this group and to hopefully get everybody here excited and involved in setting the standards for next generation of technology. Michael?
Hi, this is Michael Cooper. My background, I spent 17 years working with W3C on development of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines and other technologies. That was a important technological change in our history, and we're now undergoing another one in the form of XR that requires new ways of thinking about solving the same problems. I'm excited to be working in this forum on the next version of accessibility standards.
Fabulous. And James.
Hi, everybody. I'm James Maki. I'm with Inclusive Reality, and we build immersive experiences, especially for the web. I got involved in this after decades in the tech industry and really interested in what are the best practices to make very accessible experiences that are inclusive for everybody.
Awesome. And so we are currently serving as the Metaverse Standards Forum Accessibility Working Group chairs. This just kicked off this year, so very new and looking forward to growing in 2025. And so just a little bit about what the Metaverse Standards Forum is, if you're not familiar. It's a nonprofit group focused on interoperability and all sorts of working groups within. So things from education to privacy, pretty much all the topics you can think of are there. And if not, you're able to spin up your own. And so accessibility was a large gap within the Metaverse Standards Forum. And XR Access, Dylan, and many others in the community recognized this and kicked off the Accessibility Working Group. Next slide. Perfect. So for today, we have some content to go over, and then we're going to end with Q&A. So as we're speaking, please jot down your questions that you have. The more questions, the better. We'd love to have a robust discussion at the end of this. But what you can expect is we're just going to briefly go over why standards matter from this group's point of view, where XR standards currently exist, the current status of the working group, and then how you can help, whether that's joining the group, participating in other ways. And then from there, we'd just love to have an open conversation about any questions you have regarding the Metaverse Standards Forum and or any thoughts you have about accessibility standards in XR. We believe that they're extremely important to drive us towards best practices for people with disabilities and created by people with disabilities, but would love to hear other people's thoughts too, and how we can probably do that more efficiently and effectively. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to just chat about the background of accessibility standards and why they matter.
Okay, I think we can go to the next slide here, Erin. And I think probably most of the people here on the call are probably have an affinity for accessibility, but let's just talk really quickly about why accessibility matters. And the first reason really is that it really helps everybody. While in this little cartoon here, we see something called the curb cut effect. And that's what that really is visualizing is the idea that these curb cuts were originally designed for people who use wheelchairs. But as you can see in the example here, they really do benefit everybody. They benefit people with strollers or shopping carts or bicycles and so forth. So although these options were designed solely with accessibility in mind, it really benefits everyone. Another great example of that is subtitles or captions, depending on which terminology you use there. Obviously, they were originally conceived primarily for deaf and hard of hearing individuals, but really as distractions have increased, as technology has made it so that it is getting harder and harder to hear things, the use of subtitles and captions in video especially has really increased over the last several years, so that according to some studies, a majority of people actually watch their videos with the subtitles and captions on. So what we found over the years is that when you design with accessibility in mind, you actually design better products and better experiences for everybody. And in my own personal experience, what I have found also is that actually, contrary to a lot of popular belief, can also increase the quality of the products. It can drive down costs. It can drive down support costs over the long term, and actually end up being a boon for your business as well. And finally, the other major reason that we talk about accessibility is that it's also law. It's really a civil right. And it's something that we'll talk in just a little bit later. But before we get to that, if we can go to the next slide. In order to make the metaverse more accessible, we do have to think about standards. And we have to think about what it means for content creators and developers and users to create an accessible metaverse. So as we looked around, there's a lot of guidance out there about XR or extended reality, which includes virtual reality and augmented reality technologies, and the metaverse. And there's a lot of overlap between those two. But there aren't a full body of standards like we might have for the web, like the WCAG guidelines. So as a group, we've been looking and investigating what guidance could be provided for designers and developers, for product makers, for consumers as well, so that developers and designers can go and make experiences that truly are accessible. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So we know we need standards, and we also have, in the United States especially, we have laws that address these standards. Again, accessibility isn't just a nice to have or because it's doing the right thing, but it's also the law. It's a civil right in this country. And although these slides are addressing United States laws, which I'm a little more familiar with, there are certainly other laws that are applicable throughout the world. So, so I'll just be talking about the United States very quickly here. But in the United States, we really have two laws that really govern accessibility here. One is Section 508 of the 1973 Rehabilitation Act, which addresses accessibility for the federal government. So anything that is related to the federal government, and that can apply to federal websites and physical spaces and so forth. Perhaps more importantly, to a business audience, so that would apply to education, healthcare, government, and so forth. To a business audience, in 1990 we had the Americans with Disabilities Act passed, and in 1998 an update to that, which actually addressed online services and offerings that are publicly available. So we have seen over the years that the ADA has been supportive of making sure that websites, any publicly available websites, are updated. And when we think about the metaverse, we really are talking to a great extent about experiences that are happening over the internet. So these laws do apply. Um, there's several cases cited here. One was the NFB versus Target. That one was a case that was talking about making the Target's website accessible to blind people or people with low vision. There was another case with Netflix which addressed subtitles not being available in instant streaming. And then more recently, we actually saw a case here with HTC that addressed the lack of caption support inside its experiences. So at many points here, as the technologies evolve, the courts have upheld that even though things like the internet and perhaps the metaverse weren't originally known, that the law is designed to update and adapt to that. So there's every reasonable expectation that those laws continue to apply today and enforce. And so therefore we want to really make sure that that people have the knowledge and tools and resources available to design these experiences and keep up with the new technologies that are coming out. Can we go to the next slide, please? So again, when we're talking about 508 or the ADA, we're really talking about federally funded programs, things that are related to the government for 508. But again, ADA does apply to regular businesses, and pretty much everything that's publicly accessible on the web does need to be accessible in its design and in content.
I'll go ahead and talk for a bit now about the state of XR standards as it stands. And unfortunately, it is a bit of a sorry state, which is what we're here to fix. So right now, there is a bit of a free-for-all when it comes to not even standards, just to guidelines, right? And there's a line between standards and guidelines. Usually that line is basically whether it can hold up in court or in kind of legal settings. But regardless, as you can tell, there's a lot of guidelines and standards that could potentially apply to XR. We have the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which is the W3C's kind of gold standard for primarily web accessibility. We have the XAUR, XR Accessibility User Requirements that the W3C put out a few years ago as kind of a first foray into XR. We have a number of things like the Game Accessibility Guidelines and the Accessible Player Experience, APX, design patterns from Able Gamers that are focused on gaming, along with things like the Xbox Accessibility Guidelines. We have things like the Meta Quest virtual reality checks, the X-Rays Excellent Developers Guide that has some great guidelines to go by. Things like the ISO IEC user accessibility needs, the Shell accessibility matrix, and even there's a group called Spoonies VR that is a kind of VR support group, and they were making their own set of guidelines just to figure out what their members could play, right? And if you are coming at this from, for example, let's say you're an accessibility consultant, as I did for several years, and you're trying to guarantee to a client that they are good to go when it comes to accessibility. What I had to do was make like a mishmash, like make a spreadsheet that shows, okay, well, it passes these things from WCAG and these things from XAUR and these things from the game accessibility guidelines. But that is a messy process and not really what you're looking for when you want that confidence that what you're making is going to pass muster. So there's three things, three kind of problems with these guidelines specifically that I want to call out. Number one is that each of them is generally only aimed at certain types of applications. For example, the game accessibility guidelines is specifically aimed at games. And it's been really helpful as a guide for XR because compared to, for example, the web content accessibility guidelines, web content, it kind of assumes that you're looking at something that is like a 2D web page, something with navigation, something with, kind of an orderly array of content that you're jumping between multiple pages. Whereas a lot of VR experiences are more like video games. You're controlling a 3D avatar around this virtual space, even if some of the things you're doing might be similar. And that makes it, again, very hard to apply any of these consistently, right? Each use case has its own separate use, its own separate set of things you need to check, and things that you might hope would work well in one case don't necessarily work in another. The second, and this kind of goes along with that, is the idea that not all of these guidelines that are out there are applicable to XR. In fact, very few of them are aimed specifically at XR. Now, I have an example here of a clip from Alchemy Studios, who does amazing accessibility work for VR, a clip from their game Vacation Simulator. And you can see their subtitles work a little bit differently than subtitles for 2D content, right? In the GIF, we're seeing, it starts off, there's a box that appears, a subtitle box that has a little icon of the speaker, a little arrow kind of pointing off to the right. And then as the user aims their head to the right and we see the robot who's talking to you kind of comes into frame, that subtitle box goes and hovers over its head, right? And this whole interaction is not something that you would need in 2D because it's typically assumed that if somebody's talking, they're on screen and just having the captions at the bottom is enough. But in XR, if you just have the captions at the bottom, how do you know where the thing is that's talking? And what happens if something comes up in between your face and where the captions are kind of supposed to be? Should it occlude? Should it come on top? That can cause motion sickness sometimes. There's a lot of things that need to be considered when it comes to XR. And captions is only one example of that. Obviously, the whole aspect of motion controls, the whole aspect of just being in a 360 environment, there needs to be a lot of reimagining of how some of these 2D standards apply in a 3D space. And that's one of the things that we're working on as part of our efforts here. And finally, the last problem that we have with these existing guidelines is that they're not comprehensive. A lot of the existing stuff out there, especially the existing stuff for XR, is aimed at helping developers kind of do best practices and make things more accessible, but not necessarily, fully accessible. And fully accessible is a loaded term, but as an example of this, we have the Meta Accessibility Virtual Reality Check 4. It says that applications should provide an option to be played with one hand and/or controller. Ideally, the user can configure the controller options. And as something to apply in this kind of early rollout of VR, where you want to help primarily game developers make their stuff more accessible to a wider audience, this is a really helpful tool, right? Don't always assume people have both hands and both controllers ready to go. And you're going to be opening up your audience to a lot more people and making it a lot better for people whose batteries suddenly run out. But what about people with no hands, right? What about that extra segment of the population? And I have up here on the screen what's called a normal distribution. And the idea of that is that generally with a lot of things, in a population, things like height, things like sensitivity, most people fall somewhere in the middle. And as you kind of go out towards those edges, you find people, people that are kind of further and further away from the norm. And the point I'm making here is that a lot of the guidelines here help maybe get you like 1.5 standard deviations away from the norm in terms of people with different needs, different abilities. We really want to get further out than that. We want to make sure that our guidelines are there such that if you meet them, then 95, 99, the vast majority of people will be able to use them. And so when we're thinking about defining accessibility, we're thinking about not just people that are able-bodied, but is your app usable for someone who is totally blind or totally deaf, someone who is quadriplegic, someone who is non-speaking, someone who has multiple forms of disability, as that kind of intersectional disability. We really want to imagine a future where anyone can use XR, where if a school wants to buy some educational software in VR, they don't have to worry about which of their students can use it. They can rest assured that if it meets these standards, it everyone will be able to use this software. And that everyone unfortunately has an asterisk, because there's always, the edge cases where people just have challenges with these things. But we really want it to apply to as many people as possible and not just settle for, this many more. So with that said, I'm going to pass it to Michael to talk a little bit about the working group itself and some of the steps we've been taking to get there.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dylan. The working group is coming together in the Metaverse Standards Forum to explore all of these issues. The MSF provides an umbrella for us to do exploration. We're not actually creating standards, but we are exploring what needs to go into standards that other organizations might create. So this group is working on accessibility. We've just started up with the goal to, as the charter says, generate insights, identify risks, recommend strategies and best practices. So we have a project plan for how to do this. I believe on the next slide. We are planning to start by looking at the collections of guidance that exist so far, the ones that Dylan was going over. Pull together all of the different pieces of guidance that address different parts of the VR, XR experience, people with different needs, etc. Collate all of that together so that we can, as much as possible, know everything that is known somewhere in the world about what makes the VR and XR experience. Once we have that collection, then we'll be able to look at it to see what's missing. What do we not know about? Is there an aspect of the user interface that isn't defined? Is there a disability that we're discovering we haven't considered what the experience would be like in the XR environment? So with that, we'll be able to start asking questions. We want to do surveys, studies if we can, any kind of ways of finding out what are the needs that people are having in the XR space. With that, we can start putting together use cases. So define what is an accessible user experience like in the VR XR world. That's going to be quite a documentation. Then we can take that set of use cases and say, what's the difference between this ideal accessible XR world and the world that we live in right now? And we will certainly see a lot of gaps. The gaps will come from a variety of places. Some of them will be that the technology doesn't provide a capability that we think we need. And it may be that the technology could provide that capability, but nobody thought of it. It may also be that we need more technology advancement before a certain need can be met. But the technology is one aspect. Then there's design guidance. Much of the accessible experience will be around authors making responsible design decisions, informed design decisions. Just the questions coming up in the short video from Alchemy Labs shows how much expertise will need to exist in the world for accessible design. And then we have all the issues with different types of user devices, applications, all of that. So with all of that information, we can start putting together what would make the world more accessible. What are we going to need? Are we going to need hardware standards of some sort? Are we going to need application programming interfaces, APIs? Is that not the solution? It was the solution for the web, but is it not the solution for XR? We don't know yet. We'll put together all these questions at the end of the 2-year lifetime of this working group. We hope we have all this information and we can put it together into a strategic plan, which will basically say what needs to happen, over the next many years. Then this working group can re-charter with a more specific mandate to work on those specific pieces. At that point, we would likely be working more directly with standards organizations in supporting them on standards or suggesting content for standards to them. Right now, we are looking for input from them and from others so that we can be sure that we have the broadest knowledge possible about accessibility in XR across all the different types of XR, all the different regions of the world, all the different types of disabilities, and anything that might impact the experience we're looking to learn about right now, and then turn that into a plan. I think that's my section.
Just to add on to that, some of these folks we still need to bring into the fold, but there are folks like the accessible platform architectures of the W3C that we've already met with and basically told us, hey, if you can come up with something that already kind of meets what we think of as like the standard for our standards, we're happy to like fast track that and try to make it incorporate it into the standards we're producing, right? And I think the first step, as we said, was focusing on that kind of user focus, but then working with groups like the IEEE and 3Play to maybe come up with more technological standards, APIs, things like that. It's all on the list.
Fabulous. And yeah, just kind of a plus one there of ensuring that this group isn't recreating the wheel, but rather adding to that wheel. So making sure that if something already exists, we're pulling it in. If another group has a lot of interest here, we're working together. The goal is to get there as unified and quickly as possible. So if you have anything that you're working on that we have yet to be aware of, please let us know. And we'll continue to operate in that manner. So the good stuff, how you can help. There's all sorts of ways you can help. Currently, our working group has 2 primary focuses. One is outreach, so getting folks to support and making sure we have the right partners in place to be successful. And the second is research. So right now we're really in a research phase of seeing what is out there, what exists. Again, let's not recreate the wheel. Let's get everything in one place before we move on to next steps. Another piece of that puzzle that we don't have currently represented in the working group is like the more technical expertise or folks who can build a prototype or test something out if we identify it as best practice. So if that's kind of your zone, please know that you're more than welcome to join. And that's actually something we're seeking to ensure we have that perspective, both as we're doing research and as we continue to grow. And so what you can do is we meet every other Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific time, a little early for the West Coasters, but that's how we can get everyone involved, including our folks in Europe and London. And the next meeting is Tuesday, the 12th, so this upcoming Tuesday. And in order to join, the link is right there. So metaverse-standards.org/members. We also have an email address if you have any questions before you want to join. And then if you're not feeling quite ready to join but want to stay in touch, we have an external mailing list. And so that's where we'll send hopefully quarterly updates on the latest and make sure everyone is in the loop. All in all, we'd love to have you join our working group if possible. Really looking to expand the folks we have doing research and outreach and hoping to create more pods moving forward to get the ball rolling here. And for those of you who haven't seen it, Dylan, it did ping the email and the mailing list in the chat thread if you're looking to click the link or copy and paste. And of course, our slides are provided in the chat thread too for that slide. So with that, as we hoped, we have about 25 minutes for a Q&A. In order to do the Q&A, Dylan, please correct me if I'm wrong. Folks can submit questions by clicking the Q&A icon at the bottom of their Zoom panel. And I also believe raising hands is an option. Let me just double check. I can see hands.
Yeah, and if anybody would prefer to ask directly, I believe we can allow guests to talk temporarily. So if
Yes.
you'd rather talk, then just pop into chat. We can do it.
Yes, and looks like we have a question that just came in. And so we'll go ahead and ask it and then raise your hand, drop questions in, and I'll make sure to kind of moderate this. So from Joseph, this may be off topic, but I feel like it's a source of interest in XR accessibility. In context of the recent DOJ ruling, what is the applicability of Title II requirements to the XR space? Basically, does the ruling apply to XR technology content? What arguments support advocating or opposing its applicability to XR tech and content?
Now, Joseph, can you elaborate on which specific DOJ ruling you're just referring to here? I'm afraid I'm slightly out of the loop.
Let me make sure Joseph has talking access. Sorry, Joseph. Allow to talk. Oh, here's Joseph. He shows up.
Hi, I wonder if you can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, so basically is the part of Title II where the Department of Justice has adopted WCAG 2.1 for all content and given every institution and organizations and community whatnot, basically a time limit of 2 years to 3 years to be totally compliant, right? So the reason what I'm asking is for my lab, I'm running into obstacle to try to acquire XR content because we're being required to provide VPAT for everything we want to purchase, whether hardware, software, whatnot. And of course, we know that in the XR space, developer really hasn't been tasked with creating VPATs or meeting standards, so they don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's sort of the pushback. And so my concern here, or my question is, I know that there are some information electronic resource accessibility coordinators are very adamant about you must meet this for, therefore you can't move forward. And so that's where my question is. You know, if we look at that ruling and we look at the requirement, the adoption of WCAG 2.1, are we able to push back and say, well, because WCAG 2.1 doesn't really cover XR space, then you really can't hold us to those standards now, right? And now allow us to acquire technology or XR content to use until it happens, just like the web. Or is it, yes, you just have to bend, you know, and bow to the policymakers and say, well, it doesn't matter. This is coming, so you must meet this. And if you can't, then you just can't opt into it. So that's where really my question is how do we address that? How do we approach that situation?
So this is Michael Cooper. First of all, I would offer the interpretation of WCAG that the problem we have with WCAG is that it doesn't really anticipate the unique features of XR very well. But you know, we knew that something like that would come when we were designing it, and we tried to make it technology neutral and future proof. And I think we succeeded to the point that I don't think there's anything in WCAG that is wrong with respect to the XR space. So you can conform to WCAG in XR, I believe. We don't have techniques or any of that, but you can meet those requirements. They're not going to take you far enough to having an accessible XR experience, and that's one of the problems that we're here to solve. But I don't think WCAG needs to be a filter for that.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. There have been organizations that have been doing VPATs for XR just to kind of show in good faith that they are trying to make things accessible. I think that goes a long way right now. I think if you can, pull from the WCAG things that are applicable in terms of, oh, we do have captions, text alternatives, we do have alternate methods of input. Um, you can kind of go through and say, look, not all of these apply as written, but here is what we're doing to improve the accessibility of our application. I think I've seen that go kind of a pretty decent way. I don't know if we have any material out there about XR VPATs. Probably be a good thing to publish, but it's definitely something where there's a big opportunity here to be the innovators who are meeting this for the first time, right? And it's I think a big selling point for your software if you can say, look, we're more likely to cross these thresholds than our competitors. Erin?
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. When this has come up, we've filled out the VPAT, which is of course not built for XR technology, but really done more of an education push of like how, like again, if it's alternative inputs, what alternative inputs are offered and how that's related, and then apply to NA to certain things. Not a direct one-to-one, definitely not perfect, but that tends to kick off the conversation of what's happening in the XR industry and whether procurement, et cetera, is justifiable, possible, or what might need to be done in the future in order to make that happen. But yeah, I think Joseph, you're calling out one of the big reasons of a need for standards here is it's really hard to even point to something or link out to a standard saying, we don't have WCAG yet for XR, but here's what the best latest and greatest is.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Joseph, for that question. Other questions from folks, feel free to either put them in chat or in Q&A or raise your hands. We can discuss. I see Maki.
All right, let me give you talking.
I got it.
You got it?
Yeah.
Excellent. Actually, it was a great, like overview to the state of affairs within the XR space and accessibility in general. So my question was regarding the discussions that you had with the likes of W3C and Meta and other players. So was there some sort of at least initial perspective? A lot of disciplines would need to work in the space to make it as accessible as possible, like speaking about medical professions and a lot of other fields plus the technologies, obviously. So I think because this is like something so massive that you would want to bring a lot of disciplines to make things relate to those, for instance, the deaf and blind, etc. Like a lot of categories would need their to be represented.
Yeah, no, and we absolutely want to bring in the people with that kind of expertise and lived experience to be part of the working group and to review our work as well, because 100% believe in nothing about us without us, right? We cannot just come in and say we know what you all need, no need to comment on it. So everything that we put out will be definitely put out for public review. We again hope to bring people into the group with that lived experience and with that expertise, so we can kind of tighten that cycle as much as possible. We'd love to, do some like prototyping and user testing to be able to refine these standards. I think some of those types of things may be contingent on getting more budget, more resources, but that is what we're trying to do as part of the outreach as well. And yeah, definitely just trying to make these as solid as possible, and that includes making sure we have people on that know what they're talking about. So yeah, big focus. Thank you. Thanks, Maki. And thanks for Maki has been one of the folks who's been part of the group thus far as we've been transitioning from exploratory group to formal working group. So thank you for your support, Maki.
Thank you very much. And this is really transformative, say, work, especially, the disruption it would cause, and a lot of different fields would need to come together to make it happen. So great work, guys. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Did I see another hand go up? That looked like it might have just vanished again.
Yeah, Mariam, if you, oh, okay, yeah, we're back. All right,
There we
Mariam,
go.
I'm gonna put you up here.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for your meeting. I'm very interested in this topic. So I have a question about integrating XR technologies with BCI brain-computer interaction, and using this technology for detecting, for example, the hand, and using this and combining it with the XR. I think, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Sorry.
you're
One
breaking up a
have
little
a,
bit, but you're talking about combining brain-computer interfaces with XR. Go on.
yes. I'm just curious about, have you ever worked with it, or do you have any suggestion? Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really great question, because brain-computer interfaces are one of those things. When we talked about reaching the most people possible, BCIs get really into the ends of the spectrum there, where even if somebody can't even open and close their eyes, they could still potentially, work with this technology. So definitely something we have our eye on. I think a lot of our work in that area is going into this idea of kind of input device agnostic technologies, where the idea is that take something like switch control, for example. This is a technique you often see used in mobile phones. The idea is that with anywhere from like 6 down to 2, or even just one button that you can press effectively, one input, yes, no, you can control your interface, right? And so whether that kind of figurative button is pressing something on a keyboard, tapping on a screen, using a sip and puff controller, or sending a brain signal, ideally, no matter what that input is, the XR device should be able to process it and use it, right? And so I think one of the things we're certainly looking at, especially when it comes to low mobility users, is this idea that, yeah, you should be able to function only having those discrete inputs. So for example, if you're using a web page, you can kind of hit tab and it'll automatically switch the focus between interactable areas. And so one way to do that in XR is to have like hotspots where, let's say, oh, there's an interactable thing over here. Rather than forcing the user to like physically walk over and bend over and pick it up, you can translate that action to 1 or 2 button presses. And that type of flexibility is definitely part of what it's going to take to make these types of technologies, and whatever other inputs and outputs that people can use, we want those to work in XR. Michael?
Okay. Do you think there is an SDK that we can use, for example, in some application such as Unity 3D for using this technology?
Possibly. Michael, did you have a response to the first part of the question? No. Okay. It's a very good question. I think Unity is definitely one of the partners we really want to engage with about this stuff, because something we didn't mention in the main presentation is that ideally we're not just looking for the content to be accessible, but the creation tools as well. And so Unity would obviously be one of the bigger tool sets, and so they'd be an important part of that conversation. In terms of like discrete APIs and things, I couldn't tell you myself. I'm not that much of a developer, more of a dabbling in prototype, but I can say I think our initial goal is to focus on the user experience of what does it mean for an experience to be accessible, and focusing on the kind of human side of that. But then phase 2 is very much to start, once we've defined that, say, hey, how do we meet this, right? And that is the point at which we'd very much be kind of talking to Udemy and to some of these other technology providers about, hey, can we build out APIs that make it easy on developers to implement this type of thing? Because it really can't be up to a developer to like invent every single software developer to invent all these accessibility systems from scratch. It needs to be, some of this stuff needs to be at the platform level. Apple has done a decent job of this as far as we can see with the Vision Pro. It has a lot of kind of platform level accessibility support. And so I think we're hoping to have everybody kind of match that and then exceed it. So
Awesome.
thanks very much for your question.
We
Thank
have
you so
about
much.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hands, 7 questions. So we're going to do very quick answers of all of them. Hopefully we can get to them. First, Michael, I want to make sure your hand's addressed, especially if it's in relation to BCI. You're on mute.
I went on to address a couple questions really quickly that I saw. One in chat about how can we standardize across different types of devices. And I think Dylan partially answered that as well. But one thing that the Metaverse Standards Forum can do is it's working on interoperability of hardware and of the data formats. And there's a lot of work being done on that. So I expect that we'll be engaging with some of that work to make sure any accessibility requirements are met. In terms of, there's a question, is there clarity on the working group involvement level and styles of involvement? We're still working on that, and the other chairs may want to answer, but we have bi-weekly meetings. We also have a GitHub repository. We work in Google Docs, and we will probably be coming up with other forms of asynchronous participation. So we hope that people can participate regardless of their ability and time. And then I'll answer, do you have a plan for how you weigh all the different and competing guidelines? My answer to that is I actually don't think they're competing. There's very little contradictory advice. There's maybe cases where somebody picked a different value, but they're all kind of saying the same thing, from a slightly different perspective. So we're just all trying to put it together. And as far as we know, we're the only group focusing on a unified global set of XR accessibility guidelines. So I think that we'll be the place that will be able to resolve any questions on those fronts. I'm done.
All right. Thank you so much. Anyone else have anything to say about those 2 questions? I think the only thing I have to add about how folks can participate is it's evolving, and to start, definitely the bi-weekly meetings are the best place to join. But then again, as we evolve, hoping to have some asynchronous opportunities as well as maybe different meeting times too for folks who have conflicts at the standard Tuesday time. And for any of those folks who we just answered your questions, feel free to raise your hand for follow-up clarification. Would love to do that. 2 more. The first one is that we'll answer live is, what are the key considerations and challenges establishing accessibility standards for XR tech in educational settings, and how can these standards be adapted to ensure inclusivity for students with diverse needs? I can take a stab at this, and then I'd love to pass to their panelists. At least a lot of the work that we're doing right now, focusing on educational settings, the challenges, quite frankly, remain the same until we have an accessible and usable platform for all people with disabilities. The educational access remains a challenge. Of course, there's additional considerations for education to some degree helpful when advocating for accessibility for a usable product, in that the laws surrounding education can be more strict. And that being said, we haven't seen firsthand a lot of educational systems push back. And so really hoping as we evolve things like those VPATs and other procurement processes, education begins to include XR in their requirements. I also think there's different considerations with ages in education. So especially when thinking about youth with disability versus adults, frequently, VR is leveraged by adults, and slowly we're seeing younger and younger folks begin to use it, whether approved or not approved, and figuring out and ensuring that accessibility solutions work for all ages and sizes. Any other panelists want to jump in on education specific topics?
I would just say that this is something that we know there are a lot of educators interested in this. There's a whole group called Educators in VR that I think we definitely hope to partner with on this type of topic, just to know not only what are the considerations for the technology itself, but also when it comes to things like procurement, right? How can we work with the people that are making purchasing decisions and understand what their needs are to in terms of their ability to justify buying products and their ability to confirm that those products are going to meet to their school standards. Because the technology is one aspect of it, but there's a much broader aspect in terms of building up confidence within communities like educators, just within disabled populations, within HR organizations, within companies, that we need to shift perception that VR is something that can be used by everybody and isn't going to cause a whole bunch of problems and headaches if you try to incorporate it at like an enterprise spanning level.
Yeah.
I see a question here from Vincent Rossi saying wondering about the participation of industry within the group. As a developer, I've been frustrated on multiple occasions by the lack of support or specific disabling of potentially supporting technologies by the underlying systems. An example is access to tactile feedback via WebXR. Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Vincent. I think one of the reasons that we've decided to do this group with the Metaverse Standards Forum is a much more direct access to a lot of the people in industry that are kind of working on these challenges, right? Because we know it's one thing to put out standards, it's another thing to have groups actually take them up and use them. And so the MSF gives us direct contact with a lot of the people in those groups that are determining how standards kind of play out with regards to XR. And we've definitely been kind of trying to build those connections, with, for example, the WebXR. I'm a member of the W3C Immersive Web Community Group, so we can go and talk to the people who are helping to shape WebXR and say, hey, this is a concern, right? So I think if that is something you're interested in, I'd love to chat more, offline or maybe at one of our meetings about the specific challenges you've been having, and maybe that's something that we can kind of put our heads together and bridge those gaps and solve. Because it's going to take a lot of us to solve these really complex technical and social problems, and the more that we are connected in trying to do so and not all working in our own silos, the better chance we'll have.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Last
Well,
one. There's one we missed. I just want to make sure we get to it and then we'll close out. MD asked, oh wait, never mind. It came through in the Q&A and the chat. So thank you, MD. Never mind. We are good.
all right. Well, let me share one more time just the again the way for you to join us. We'd love to see you see any or all of you at our meetings here. Again, the next one is going to be on November 12th. If you want to join with that, you can go here to metaversestandards.org/members. And I'm assuming y'all can see my browser right now. Something to understand about the MSF is that membership is by organization. So if your organization already has a membership with the MSF, then you should just be able to join with your email. Otherwise, if you are, for example, an independent consultant, you can just make kind of a one-person organization and join as a free participant organization. There's no cost. They're really not trying to exclude people from doing this. So give that a shot. If you come hit the join now, you'll be able to go through the setup, or just come up here. And you should be able to I believe, create an account with if your organization's already a member. If you have trouble with any of this, just email us at the chairs link, and we can send you a Zoom just a Zoom link for individual meetings and try to get you involved, because we really do need everybody to pitch in here and to become a part of the solution. And we're really hoping to see you all there.
Fabulous.
right.
Thanks everyone for joining. Really appreciate it and hope to see you all soon.
Thank you.